Radio 87.7 FM, and welcome to our show, Steps Out of the Darkness into the Light. We are your host, Shaila Tayub and
Josez Pinder.
And together we bring over 20 years of experience working therapeutically with children, young people, vulnerable adults, and those who vulnerable within our communities, Leicester and beyond, from advocating to mental health support worker and developing programs and workshops in our community. Supporting individuals through mental health challenges, trauma, grief and loss. This show is a safe space where we explore emotional healing, mental clarity and inner peace from a therapeutic lens, looking at the mind, body and spirit and soul connection. A disclaimer: the information shared during this show is for general informational and educational purpose only. The therapist's advice and insights are based on the professional experience and should not be construed as personalized therapy or guidance for any individual case. If you are experiencing mental health concern, please seek the help of a licensed therapist or a mental health professional. The views expressed by the therapist are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the radio station.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Shaila. Good afternoon. We bring to you today a programme where we will be looking at grief, its impact, the stages, and also how it manifests itself. In particular, we will be looking at how grief is impacted and impacts on an addiction that is often dormant and invisible: gambling. As we go through today's programme, we hope that you will find it insightful. We hope that it will bless you and give you some clarity in the places where there is none. Please, if you should need to call in for any reason or you would like to further discuss the effects of grief, we have at the end of the show all of the information and places and organisations that you are able to contact. So, to begin, we're looking at grief. What is grief, Shaila?
So grief comes in different forms. A lot of people look at grief as maybe a loss of maybe someone, but grief can also be a loss of identity, your health, your wishes, your aspirations, the things that you plan for in the future. So loss and grief is not just homed in to one aspect. It goes wide than just what we think it is.
Definitely. It's not just about the physical death of someone. Like you just rightfully said, it's a significant loss, and often that can be your house, your environment, loss of a country, loss of family, loss of friends, loss of a relationship, even a loss of a job.
Yes.
Because that's quite significant for a lot of people.
And loss of time. You know, a lot of people may stay in a job for far too long or a relationship for far too long. And I understand that they may want to make it work. They may want to try their best, but at the end of it, after many years have gone by, I know I've been with clients where they reflect like, why did I stay for so long? And when I'm working with these clients, it's like I can see the grief process, which they're not aware of, but I have to bring it to the light that you're grieving the lost time that you had.
I think what we may miss is that grief is universal.
Yes.
It's not just for males or females, blacks or whites. It's universal. It's felt across the board. It's a process that we often go through, which also processes us, but we're not really aware of it because the pain is often so intense in our grief that we often want to avoid grief. So just going forward, there are often 5 stages that are associated with grief. These are denial, anger, bargaining, and depression and acceptance. These 5 stages was coined by a therapist, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Though they are not in any specific order, grief will sometimes bounce between. So you might be in denial 1 minute, acceptance the next, and go back and forth between anger and bargaining.
Yeah.
Which is, for most people, they believe that grief has a full-blown structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how it works. And nobody tells a lot of people that grief is personal. But it also often remains private.
It's personal to the person. It's their journey.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people tend to rush the process or suppress the process. Some people, they feel like life is going on. I don't have time for this. I don't have time to process my loss and my grief because everything else is still moving. But the reason why we're doing this show is to say that there is a process, that there is for you to have time to heal properly so that it can benefit you in the long run. Because a lot of people that suppress their grief, suppress their loss, it will come out in different ways, as we will explore later in the show. So if we're looking at the 5 stages of the grief process and the loss process, so we've got denial. What is denial?
Denial is the reaction and the response, the initial reaction and response to hearing or acknowledging there is a grief that's taken place. So often that will come with a refusal of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So it's almost the person's fighting themselves. You know, we hear bad news. No, that's not true. That didn't happen. That's not the case. It's almost like a disconnection between reality and what the person might be hearing.
That's right. So an example can be, this can't be real. I just talked to them yesterday. They were fine. So it's that initial shock. Like, you know, I just saw them. I heard their voice. I spoke to them. And a lot of people may even have a guilt because maybe they haven't spoken to that person in a long time. Or then they will start feeling that wish they did more for that person.
But at this stage is often met with confusion.
Yes.
Because the confusion will often be to do with the lack of understanding of how is this possible?
Yes.
How did this happen?
Yes. So the denial also, I think it takes away at some point a little bit of our reality.
Yeah.
Because we're out of that space because we're in shock. So our body's gone into shock. So
It buffers.
Like, yeah.
It's like we're buffering.
Yes.
Is that what the young people call it these days? Lagging. Yeah. So we can get a little bit laggy and it's a buffering. So it kind of is the brain's way of making sure that we're processing but not too quickly. Because we will go into shock.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So we got the other one is anger.
Ooh. Anger. Anger is an iceberg. Often it's just the tip of the iceberg. What most people don't realise is that emotion is not standing on its own. Under anger, there's often frustration, hurt, pain, anguish, sorrow. All of these additional emotions are also stirring, but most of the time we can only say that it's anger.
Like you said, it's only the tip, what people see in people's behaviour. So the outbursts that they have, it's only, like you said, the tip. There's something deep within that is causing them to behave in that kind of way.
And especially upon hearing about grief, the biggest outburst, or what I would call the root cause of the anger, would be, oh my gosh, it's a fear.
Yes. It's
the anger is often rooted in fear.
Yeah. So feelings of frustration, resentment, or blame often arises in the part of the grieving process. So example would be like, why did this have to happen? It's not fair. You know, if it's a health condition, you know, the doctor should have done more. If it's something that didn't go your way or a tragedy that's happened, we tend to look at, blame God.
Yeah.
You know, why did God do that to me? You know, then we question God and the connection we have with God. And this also then goes on to the third part, bargaining.
Yeah. That's where a lot of people will bargain. If I'd only done this, if I could have only done that, if God would only have allowed this. And often this is where, for many people of faith, will have a crisis of faith. Because it will be the point where they are either leaning into God or leaning further away from God and questioning even if there is sometimes a God, because they're in so much pain, they don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Pain of a loss can grip as though it's got you locked in a vice.
In a chokehold sometimes, where we find it hard to breathe.
Yeah.
And that then makes us question, like, where is the fairness? You know, where is, you know, why do I have to go through this? And as a Muslim, Allah Ta'ala has spoken about when we go through a grieving process, to have that faith in Him. And we do have a period of mourning, but that period of mourning doesn't mean the feeling that's it, is done. You know, Allah Ta'ala is very aware that we are going to grieve. Even our Prophet grieved so many years after losing his wife, his children. It's not that, oh, we've got 3 days or 3 months or 4 months and our grieving process stops. No. It's that we're having faith in God. We're having tawakkul in God, that He knows He's doing the best He can for us. And He knows that, you know, what lies ahead of us, because He is the planner for the creation. So have that trust in God. Keep moving in life, because He doesn't want you to stand still in your grief and loss. He wants you to still move.
I think also with faith, I think God has, when He says there is a period for mourning and there is a period for grief, He's also saying that it takes time.
Yes.
Healing takes time. It takes time to heal. It's not a process that you just run through. Grief is a process that will often process you. It goes through you, but we often feel as though we are going through grief. It's a state of being, but we can't remain in that state.
So we've got some questions to ask the audience if they want to call in or text in. Let's get the questions.
How have you experienced your grief?
Yes.
What did you learn from your grief? Has grief taught you anything about yourself that you didn't know before or after the grief? And how do you internalise it? What's your perspective on it after you've come out the other end?
So you can call in to the studio on 0116 48 or you can message in on 077 488 55055. So we can continue with the process of bargaining. So the stages of like bargaining, for example, if I had just convinced them to go to the doctor sooner, maybe they will still be here. So that's just an example when we're bargaining with ourselves.
Yeah.
The next one is depression.
Yeah.
So a deep sadness and despair sets in as the reality of the loss becomes undeniable.
Depression is often the internalisation of the anger.
Yes.
That you can't express externally, so you internally bring it in and upon yourself. Depression will often occur in the grief process and in many places in our lives where there is a change that is occurring that not necessarily we want to occur, but is occurring nonetheless, and it takes us out of our sense of control.
Yeah, yeah.
So depression will manifest a lot like it would do. It's the isolation, it's the intense sadness, decreased sleep, loss of appetite, loss of motivation, loss of purpose, loss of faith, increase in fears and anxiety, and the manifestation of behaviours that you wouldn't normally do.
And just to be mindful, listeners, that this is a process that someone may go through. And it's not to feel like, oh, what's going wrong with this person? They're losing their minds, you know, and rushing. Give them that space and time. You know, prolonged depression, okay, then you know that maybe they need some help. But if it's just in that moment, give it some time for them to navigate through their loss and their grief.
Yeah, it's a natural response.
Yeah. So the last one is acceptance. While the pain doesn't disappear, the person begins to find a way to live with the loss.
I think acceptance is a difficult one for most people because it's hard to accept the truth of what is rather than what you wanted something to be. And making that make sense for a lot of people, that's a battle.
Yeah.
If we had to condense all of these stages we could simply put them into 3 categories, really. There is the state of confusion, which is in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have chaos, because following confusion, there will always be chaos. And that chaos will bring about a conflict, and that will be the stage of depression. That's where the person is battling themselves against the external, which is the reality of the situation. Someone has passed, the loss of the job, the loss of the marriage has occurred. The acceptance part is the being and becoming at peace with what is.
Mm.
It doesn't mean to say that you are over it and have fully gotten through it. What it means is that you have decided to no longer fight against it.
Yeah. And like you said, be at peace with it, honouring it, and still going on with your life.
But also honouring that you're in pain.
Yeah.
It's very easy for most people to say, get over it, it's been too long. But the thing is, with pain, it will first whisper to you. And if you don't hear it, pain will demand itself to be felt. And as human beings and living in cultures and societies that often want to hide or pretend that there is no pain, pain comes more.
Mm-hmm.
It hits you worse when you choose to ignore it.
I think that's how many people cope.
Until
they don't
there is
wanna-
no coping.
Yeah. Suppressing it, and because they don't want to feel the pain. And I see that a lot in my work, where a lot of people have been holding it for so many years.
Yeah.
And I feel like also there may be an aspect where they're not allowed to be. They're not allowed to express, themselves properly, and people really understanding, what they're actually going through. Some people may get tired of them, keep talking about it, expressing or being the way they are. And I don't think it's so much the person, it's the people, the society that put that pressure on them because they can't handle it.
But it's interesting you use the word allow.
Mm.
Who needs permission?
Yeah.
What people need is to be enabled to grieve. That's the environment, the safe space, the safe person that can hold them in their state of being with empathy, compassion and care. Nobody should be seeking permission to grieve.
That's right. But I feel like in this society, people are. Is it okay for me? Because it makes other people feel uncomfortable when people are in their mourning stages, when they're going through, because everyone, like you said, they look at grief and loss differently. Some people can't feel like, oh, you just have to get on with it. When maybe the thing that person lost, maybe it's a person or a sentimental thing. It meant so much to them.
Yeah.
And it's not easy for them within a couple of days, weeks or months just to forget about that. And this is where I see where, clients coming in that are going through bereavement or loss and grief, they haven't been able to have that space. They say to me, people don't understand me, or they're tired of hearing, how upset I am. But that person meant so much to me. It was part of my life, especially if it's like a significant other or a child, for example. And they feel like they just have to suppress their emotion, especially if they're around people that have got children or significant other and they've lost theirs. They feel like they have to put a brave face on, like they can't show emotion. And when they do, like, why are you upset for? Why are you making the environment in a sad way, But that person is still grieving.
Yeah.
But they're not allowed to feel authentic. They're not allowed to be themselves. So they are pushed then to be something that they're not. So to suppress it again. And we live in a society of suppression. And I think this is how it manifests into all these different behaviors, because people don't know how to cope.
Yeah.
So then they use coping defenses to be able to cope with life, a situation, and especially the society that we live in.
I think you've made a very valid point there, but it keeps the person in a state of conflict because they're having to pretend externally that they're okay as to not upset anybody, but internally they are distraught.
Yeah.
That is a conflict that will result often, what we will see, in mental health. Pretending to be, but not being okay.
Yeah. I think that's a major issue that we have.
Yeah.
The authenticity of someone not being able to be their true self because their fear of being judged, fear of being outcasted out of the society, because they have different values, different beliefs, different way they process things. And then what does that do to that individual?
It keeps them in their pain.
Yeah.
Because their pain should be met with compassion. It should be met with care.
But then people are quick to judge their behaviours. Oh, look, he's doing this, she's doing that, she's acting like this, and he's acting like that. But where's that person meant to go?
I think often what people don't realise is that people fear what they don't understand.
Yes.
And through a lack of understanding, it brings about a culture of fear. And because other people can't, and the person can't understand their pain, it makes it even more fearful.
So this is what this show is about, is to help people have that knowledge and awareness of what people may be going through. So if we were to break it down, Jo, how can others help or support? How can people be in their loss and grief and be authentic?
It is so simple. It's that just sometimes simply sitting with someone, you don't even have to speak. You can just be in the presence of someone, because the presence of somebody else in your pain can bring a relief. No words needed. It can sometimes be a simple hand holding. It can sometimes be a gentle stroke of the back. Or it can just be where you're sat separately, just in the same space. And that person knowing, okay, I'm not alone in this. A listening ear. Words of wisdom, words of comfort. But also I think it's very important that you are mindful when you are grieving who you place yourself with, the places and the people, because you're at your most vulnerable. So you'll need to be at the safest.
So when grief and loss is not processed, in the right way, it manifests into other behaviours.
It will.
Yeah, so if we're looking at one of the manifestations that we'd like to bring into our show today, it's about gambling and gambling harms.
Yes. So manifestation of grief is and can be considered to be in forms of behavioural changes, social changes. So the individual might change, their personalities might alter, the way that they may have once been, they have changed psychologically. Also socially, they may isolate themselves, they may be around different groups of people. Body changes, so increasing stress, anxiety, intensity of moods. And also these can manifest internally and externally. So with very much addictions, drugs, alcohol, harmful sexual behaviours. And we are aware that gambling is one. It's not often talked about, because I think if we had to say it, it's one of the most covert of the addictions.
Yeah.
It's really hidden.
Yeah.
And it's easily accessible. And technically it's legal.
Yeah.
So it's like a triple vice.
Yes.
Almost.
Yes. Definitely. And that's why it's easy accessible. Okay.
So we've just had a question come in, and it says, in our community, we don't like talking about death and grief. It's a sign of weakness. What do you make to that, Shaila?
Yes. That's absolutely true. And this is what we're trying to educate people around, thinking that it's not a sign of weakness. It's a process that someone has to go through. And to allow that person to go through that process to then be their best version. But if we are not going to give that space to talk about death or loss or grief, then how are we going to ignite our society into being powerful individuals and, being their authentic self? This is where we're going to see a lot of people then going into despair and doing, all these behaviours. So example like we're talking about today, gambling or other addictions as well.
I think that was quite an interesting statement. It's a sign of weakness. but I know from personal experiences and seeing things externally, we only truly know our strength when we have been weakened.
That's right.
And weakness in itself is a blessing, and where also, is that not the stage or the part where God enters in
That's
and
right.
shows us his strength?
Yes. Yes.
So surely then it cannot be a weakness.
Mm-hmm. Through our hardships.
It's a process.
Yeah.
It's a process of strengthening.
I think through our hardship, this is where we learn resilience.
Mm-hmm.
We learn how to face hardships in our lives. So it'll make us do things that we haven't been used to. So it waken us up a bit, and we start utilizing, the resources around us, and we become a better version of ourselves.
But it's also a form of activation of your faith.
Yes, yes. So having that, again, trust in Allah, walking in his path, and a lot of people, in the society feel like death is, it's something that happens. We have to just get on with it. But it is that Allah Ta'ala is saying that get on with your life, but also in a manner that is healthy for you.
Yeah.
It can't be a rush process. So, when grief, when we experience grief, our brain is in distress.
Mm-hmm.
So we have heightened emotions, loss of control. We have that urgent need for that relief. So gambling, it releases that, the good hormone, the dopamine that we need, the feel-good chemical in our brain. So in the short term, it gives us that relief and gives us that, distraction that we need and the excitement. But in the long run, it creates, more problems for us.
But just with so many addictions, it's always a quick fix.
Yes.
A quick hit. But you said it makes you feel. The thing with grief is everybody's always wanting to feel better rather than looking at being and becoming better.
That's right. So today in the studio, we do have a special guest, Marla, from Shama Women's Centre. And she is trained in gambling and gambling harms. She has helped many in the community with their struggles and trained many organizations in regards to gambling and gambling harms. Welcome, Marla, to the show.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Shaila. Thank you, Joe.
Nice to have you.
Thank you for coming. So, how do you think grief links in with gambling from your perspective? And what have you seen in the community that you've worked in?
Okay, so if we're looking at how grief or trauma affects somebody in terms of gambling, from what both of you said, it's when they're at their most vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So it's, a time when their emotions are probably not in their control. And like you said, grief can be for a number of things. Both of you explained whether that's job loss or relationship, whatever that may be. And due to that and that vulnerability that they're going through, gambling is, like you said, to reach that high, to give them that feel-good factor. And they use it as an escape. So gambling is something that they turn to escape those emotions that are making them feel sad, to fill that gap of loss, or to give them that lift that they think that will make them feel better. But Joe, I think you've already mentioned that is short-lived.
Yes.
And it is a short-lived thing. It's a coping mechanism to provide an escape from those emotions and feelings. And what we found by supporting people that are going through this is that in turn it only then leads to making them feel more sad and can lead to more guilt, which can then lead to lies and then the consequences that follow, financial problems, and it actually becoming an addiction.
I think also it gives them a false sense of hope and control.
That's right. It does. It definitely does. They feel, that they're back in control again. Yeah. They've got control of some part of their life.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I often use in therapy in regards to control, and it says, "It is your lack of understanding that will create your need for the sense of control."
Yeah.
It's when people don't understand what is going on with them internally, what is happening externally, that they will reach for anything that gives them the sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
But what they don't realise is that you're not actually in control of anything. There is just something you're not understanding.
That's right.
Why is it important for someone to feel a sense of control?
It's that it's that pretense, isn't it? It's what I refer to as peeing. It's where the clients will often pee. They're pretending, they're escaping, they're avoiding something.
And it's kind of their safety thing, isn't it? If they're back in control, it gives them that safe, that they're feeling safe again.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're feeling strong again.
Yeah.
So when there's something's out of their control, they feel unsafe.
Yeah.
The security's been lifted.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with themselves. So to be able to get some sort of control, then they act on this. So we've got another message come in. Just a colour for the great program. Hi Joe. Please can you discuss the community spiritual aspect of this topic? We are conditioned through these channels and we misinterpret how to cope with problems. It's a very real issue that most of us ignore.
Okay, so I don't have enough minutes on this radio show for this, but we will look at this in more detail. But briefly, what I will say to you is in regards to the spiritual aspect, it is multifaceted and it's multi-layered. It is not a weakness to grieve. It is not a weakness to go through difficult times. When you have your relationship with God, these are often the times that you can either lean into him or you can step away from him. And often we don't realise that, yes, you will probably find yourself doing both. Battling with your faith, battling with yourself, battling and questioning your beliefs, and even questioning God at times. That is the reality of it. God knows that these things would happen. God is very much aware that you would question if he exists. But in questioning him, do you not then have to go to him instead of away from him? The spiritual aspects of grief are still, I know, culturally very different amongst cultures and their interpretation of them. But I think if we all just understood that at its core, grief is a process that was designed to process us. It teaches us more things about ourselves than we could ever imagine going through a different type of process.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Text message. So if we continue with Marla, so what are the biggest warning signs that gambling is becoming an addiction, and how can we help someone?
Okay, so I think it's looking out for those signs, the telltale signs that, you know, there's something wrong or, you know, someone's struggling. So it could be that they're preoccupied, be it on their phone, their tablet or computer all the time. Like we touched on earlier, Joe, you touched on isolation. So they're avoiding social settings. They're isolating themselves from friends or family or making excuses not to attend. Again, possibly making that time or quiet space again where they can get that control, be gambling, feel that, you know, there's that high. Mood changes can be another thing. So they can go through highs and lows. They can get angry, emotional, easy, irritable. So again, a combination of these things. I'm not saying in isolation, but a combination of these things. They may be becoming, you know, more secretive or lying about what they're doing, or how they're spending their money, or whether they have any. You might find that things start to go missing, sometimes leading to even the extreme of criminal activity. So, you know, there's these kind of signs in combination that somebody could be struggling with gambling harms. They might be asking to borrow more money. They might be using that to then chase losses. You might be aware that they're gambling so that they're using more and more money. And that's when it gets to the point where they're unable to stop or control that urge.
Thank you very much, Marla. So what are the first steps for someone struggling with gambling-related harms to regain control?
So I think the important thing is to talk. I think that's the first and foremost step is for that individual to understand that they might be suffering from gambling harms, you know, opening up about it and talking about it without being judged or blamed for you know, doing that. And I think the thing is there is a lot around the blame, the guilt. It's culturally it's name, shame or guilt. So what we want to do is take that away, allow them that space to talk and really listen to them, show some kindness and empathy, offer that support to get the help, because there is help out there, and you know, predominantly in our communities, across the minority ethnic communities, people don't know where to reach out for help or for that support. It's helping them to open up and make them feel comfortable. There's a lot of other steps that can follow, sort of setting spending limits, supporting them to do that, giving financial control to a trusted person, someone they trust to control their finances, getting them interested, exploring at other things. So when they're getting that urge to gamble, what could they do? Like, what can they, distract themselves with? And if it's not distraction, what hobbies do they like? Where are their interests? So when that urge comes, they've got that support to turn to something else or turn to someone else. If you don't talk about it, they'll feel like they haven't got someone to turn to. And that's really important.
Okay. Just going off of what you said, Marla, when obviously counselling and looking and working with individuals with addiction, what I personally have noticed is that, first off, the word addiction doesn't add anything to anybody's life. No. It subtracts. Mm-hmm. Also, the fact that everybody that I've come across that's had an addiction has a disconnection.
Yeah. With
themselves, with other people, with and to God. There is a disconnection somewhere. Mm-hmm. So when we're saying to talk to other people, if they're often feeling disconnected from themselves,
yes,
to connect with other people will be even more difficult. Mm. And sometimes I don't even think they're aware that there's a disconnect between their own selves and their relationships.
Yeah.
They often have a perception that, oh no, they're fine, we're still talking, but there's been no communication.
No, you're absolutely right. And a lot of people we come across do say that it's broken relationships. Mm-hmm. People stop talking to them.
Yeah.
They feel isolated. They don't feel like they've got anybody to turn to. And I think the important thing is that the people around them as well, they're affected others. So like you said, we don't really like to use the term addiction.
Yeah.
For gambling, they're struggling with gambling harms, whether they're directly gambling themselves or whether they're an affected other. So somebody impacted by someone else's gambling. And there's support out there for them. We understand that relationships may break down. They may not feel like they can speak. I think the first step is then reaching out to those services that offer support like Shama.
Yeah.
And, providing that safe, trusted space to listen and support them and to start making those small steps to making changes and hopefully supporting them with lasting changes as they go on.
Okay. So also we would then look at the root causes of the addiction. So it goes hand in hand. So often therapy would be something that they should also look at to look at the root, because the addiction is the manifestation of whatever is deep down there. It's like a tree trunk. Mm-hmm. The addiction's rooted, but it grows. The tree trunk is the addiction, but the manifestation is what it comes off the branches.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of reasons. There could be, gambling as a reason, the underlying cause, like you said, the root cause. Through counselling, through having that therapy, they can talk and establish those reasons. I think it's for people to identify those in those sessions and again be able to signpost them for support for the gambling. Yeah, that's right.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
So I see gambling as a behaviour. And as we said before, behaviour, there's always like an underlining issue.
There's a reason.
Yeah, so there's a reason for, people's behaviours. And it's about tackling those core issues to help prevent those kind of behaviours.
Yeah.
But it's people having services, like yourself, Marla, and therapies, that invite these people. A lot of people I find are scared, or there's a taboo around seeking, help, especially with mental health, because people see it again, maybe has a weakness, or they don't believe it, or you just have to man up or woman up and just go with it. But how then are you going to heal if you're not tackling what is the core issue within us? So therapy is a safe space for you to be able to talk freely. It's the therapist, it should be non-judgmental, just like the service you're providing, Mal, because then only they can talk freely about what's really bothering them, and then that's where the healing process will start, and then we can help them build and rebuild themselves.
I think the healing process can start outside, because even though as therapists we are non-judgmental, it's not because it's in our job description to be non-judgmental. It's who I am.
Yeah.
So if more people on the outside of a therapeutic room had those things of a listening ear, provided empathy, and wasn't so quick to judge, people would talk more, people would receive the help quicker.
Yes.
And it wouldn't always lead to having to talk to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to talk about some take-home tips for the listeners out there, what would you suggest, Marla?
So where you're sort of struggling with gambling harms, and it's leading to it's the risk scale, isn't it? So if it's something that they're just sort of getting into because of their vulnerabilities, what we want them to do is reach out for support early, know that there's help out there. There's lots of tools that can be implemented, like banking blocks on their sort of apps, excluding themselves from this gambling activities online or venues, depending on where that is. There's various systems in place to block those things. But what we want to do is encourage them to reach out for that support, take that first step, and then, from there we can then help and support them with those things. They might not understand things due to language barriers, so we can support with that as well. So I think it's really important, if take anything away from today, is that there is support out there for gambling harms. If it's, identified through their conversations with their therapist, the therapist can refer them into SHAMA. If they're listening to the show and they want to reach out, then obviously they can contact SHAMA on 0116 251 4747, and they can simply just leave their name and telephone number and request a call back. So they don't have to really leave any details, just to say that they need a call back is in relation to support for the Holistic Recovery Programme, and that is our gambling harm support, and they will then be contacted by myself, and we can have that conversation to start helping them to make those lasting changes.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Marla. And for us, our segment today, Joe, any take-home tips?
I would say what I said earlier is healing takes time, and it takes time to heal. And I would say for those individuals experiencing grief, whether it's past grief, present grief, grief requires three things. It requires you to have patience with yourself and time and trust with the process. It's a process, it's a journey. It will get you from one place to another. It's transitory, but grief is also transformative, if you allow it.
Thank you very much, Joe. So final words will be, grief is painful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural way to relieve, but real healing comes from facing the pain and not escaping it. If you or someone know you're struggling, remember help is available and recovery is possible. As we have gone through the show, various ways of getting that help and support, and even as individuals, by yourself within the community, being able to heal, as Joe mentioned as well, it's just offering that space to that person, just listening, being non-judgmental, showing them that empathy. Acknowledge your grief. It's okay to feel the pain.
Yeah.
We don't need to run from it. We don't need to hide it. It's real. It's there. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to even be in it. It's the process.
Yeah.
Find healthy distractions. So what could we suggest of healthy distractions? So walking, writing, creating activities, and talking to loved ones. Seeking professional help, so therapists, helpline, support groups, Marla at Shama Women's Centre, and limiting risky behaviour, so avoid turning to gambling, alcohol, drugs, and coping strategies.
Sometimes it might just require the person just to be still.
Yeah.
Do nothing, but just be still.
So if you or anybody have been affected, you can contact Marla at Shama Women's Centre on 0116 251 4747. We have Jo as well in the studio, and she has her own counselling, and she's available
on amisaycounselling@gmail.com, and you can find me on Psychology Today. Amite Counselling.
Thank you for your